The space station was always alive with noise, a storm of voices from 100 worlds. Traders shouted, machines roared, lights flickered like restless stars. But Elias Ward, a human drifter, walked through the bazaar with only one credit left in his pocket. He was tired, hungry, and his boots were worn thin. He had traveled across too many systems. He had seen too many faces that looked at him like he was nothing. Humans were not hated, but they were not trusted either. Some called them reckless, some called them cursed. Elias stopped at a food stall. The smell of roasted meat drifted into his nose. His stomach growled like a wild animal. He touched the single coin in his pocket, the last credit he had. One coin could buy him a meal. One coin could give him strength to keep moving. But then he saw her. Near the edge of the bazaar, where the metal walls leaked cold air from broken vents, an alien widow sat on the ground, her skin pale blue, her eyes glowing faint silver. She trembled as the freezing wind wrapped around her thin clothes. Her hands were bare, her lips cracked, her body small and fragile against the endless steel of the station. The crowd passed her like she did not exist. Tall insect merchants clicked their jaws and looked away. Scaled warriors laughed at her weakness. Even other widows avoided her. She was not just poor, she was cursed. Elias's eyes softened. He could not look away. She looked like someone who had lost everything. She looked like someone who was ready to fade into the cold. He pulled the coin from his pocket again. It was warm against his skin, a coin for food or a coin for her. His stomach twisted, but his heart answered before his mind. Elias walked to a cloth stall. The seller, a rough alien with metal rings in his skin, sneered at him. "Human, you cannot afford much," he said. Elias lifted the coin and pointed at a blanket. It was old, rough, but thick enough to hold warmth. The seller laughed. "For that widow? She is a ghost already. Do not waste it." But Elias placed the coin down. The seller shrugged and gave him the blanket. Elias walked to the widow. The crowd turned their heads, some curious, some whispering. When he bent down and wrapped the blanket around her shoulders, the air seemed to pause. The widow gasped. Her silver eyes widened. No one had touched her in years. No one had cared. Her trembling slowed as the blanket's warmth spread across her body. She looked at Elias with a mix of fear and wonder. "Why?" she whispered, her voice soft, broken, almost lost in the sound of the bazaar. Elias smiled a tired smile. "Because you are cold," he said. Simple words, but true. The crowd muttered, "Strange human, foolish human, wasting his last credit on nothing." Some shook their heads, others laughed, but some kept watching with eyes that carried a spark of respect. The widow clutched the blanket with weak hands. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Her tears glowed faint silver as they fell. She bowed her head to him. Elias stood, his stomach still empty, his path still uncertain, but for a moment, he felt lighter. He turned to walk away, disappearing into the moving sea of the bazaar. Behind him, the widow whispered a vow. "Kindness is never free. I will repay you, human." Her eyes followed him, not with fear now, but with a promise. What Elias did not know was that his small act had already changed his fate. In the shadows of the station, hidden eyes were watching, hunters who marked the widow as prey. And now, the human who had touched her life was tied to her destiny. As Elias walked away, cold and hungry, he did not know he had just written the first line of a story that would shake the stars. Elias thought the moment was finished. He had given the blanket, he had done his part, and now the galaxy would move on without noticing. He walked through the bazaar alleys, his stomach still empty, his boots still broken, but his heart carried a small warmth that food could never give. But the galaxy did notice. It always notices when a human chooses kindness over survival. As Elias turned down a dim corridor of the station, he felt it. The soft sound of footsteps behind him, light and careful, like a shadow trying not to be seen. He glanced back, and there she was, the widow wrapped in the rough blanket, her silver eyes glowing faintly in the dark. "You should not follow me," Elias said, his voice calm but tired. "I have nothing more to give." The widow stepped closer, her hands clutching the blanket like treasure. "You gave once," she whispered. "Now I must give back." Elias shook his head. "Kindness does not need payment," he replied. "I do not want anything from you." Her eyes flashed with a strange light, almost fearful, almost desperate. "Among my people, kindness is never free," she said. "If someone saves you, you belong to them. If someone warms you, you must warm them. This is our vow." Elias frowned. He had heard many alien traditions, but this one was dangerous. Ownership, debt, bonds that could trap a man forever. "I am not your master, I am just a man who bought a blanket," he told her. But she lowered her head, trembling. "You are more than that now," she whispered. "You are my shelter." Elias sighed. He wanted to walk away, but he knew her words carried a weight. She was not simply thankful, She was binding herself to him with a cultural chain he could not break, and somewhere deep inside, he felt the pull of responsibility. The air shifted, the corridor grew colder, Elias's instincts sharpened, a shadow moved above the metal beams, then another, he was being watched. "Stay close," he muttered to the widow, his hand brushing the old pistol on his belt. 3 figures dropped from the rafters, tall hunters in armor marked with strange glowing tattoos, their eyes fixed not on Elias, but on the widow. "She belongs to us," one of them hissed, his voice a low growl. "Step aside, human." The widow froze, clutching Elias's sleeve, her silver tears forming again. Elias stood between them without thinking. "She belongs to no one," he said, his voice firm. The hunters laughed, sharp and cruel. "You would fight for her? With an old gun and an empty stomach? Foolish human," one spat. "She is worth more than your entire race." Elias's grip tightened on the pistol, his heart steady. He had no plan, no allies, only the strange vow of a freezing widow who now hid behind him. "Why do you want her?" Elias asked, his tone steady though his mind raced. "She carries blood that must be erased," the leader said, his eyes glowing red. "Her family is gone. Her line must end. She is the last." Elias glanced at her, her head bowed in shame, her secret now exposed. She was not just a widow, she was something more, something dangerous. The hunters stepped forward, weapons raised, and the widow whispered into Elias's ear, "If you stay, you die with me. If you walk away, they will not follow you. No one would blame you." Elias smiled faintly, his eyes never leaving the hunters. "Humans don't walk away," he whispered back. The hunters charged. Elias pulled his pistol and fired. The narrow corridor exploded with sound and sparks. His aim was quick, his movement reckless, the kind of fight only a human would choose. The widow cried out as energy bolts slammed into the walls. Elias grabbed her hand and pulled her into the maze of passages. The hunters followed, their voices echoing, "Run, human, run! We will skin you both!" They raced through the station, weaving between markets and shadows. Elias's lungs burned, but he never let go of her hand. She stumbled, but he pulled her up each time. Finally, they ducked into an abandoned docking bay, the silence heavy, the air thin. Elias pressed his back against a wall. The widow collapsed beside him, her chest heaving. "You should have left me," she whispered, her voice full of guilt. "You gave a blanket, and now you give your life." Elias looked at her, sweat dripping, eyes hard but kind. "I gave because you were cold," he said. "I fight because they would take you, that is enough." The widow stared at him, her silver eyes glowing brighter than before. "You do not understand," she whispered. "You are part of my bond now, my warmth, my fate. If you fall, I fall with you." Elias did not answer, but deep inside he knew the truth. This was no longer about one coin, no longer about one blanket. This was a dangerous gratitude, a thread that tied his fate to hers, and in the shadows of the station, he could feel the storm building. The docking bay was silent, dust floating in the dim light. Broken ships rested like skeletons of forgotten wars. Elias leaned against the cold wall, pistol still warm in his hand, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. Beside him, the widow clutched the blanket tightly around her small frame, her silver eyes glowing faintly in the dark. For a long moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the hum of the station's distant engines, but finally Elias broke the silence. "They knew you," he said, his voice low. "They hunted you, not me. Who are you, really?" The widow trembled, her fingers twisting the rough fabric. "You should not have asked," she whispered. "The answer will make you regret your kindness." Elias gave a tired smile. "I already regret many things," he said, "but never kindness." Her eyes lifted to meet his, and in that glow Elias saw something more than fear. He saw pride buried under pain. He saw a history she had tried to bury. "My name is Sira," she said owly, her voice shaking. "I am not only a widow, I am the last of the Vera bloodline." Elias frowned. The name felt sharp, dangerous. He had heard it once, in rumors traded by mercenaries and smugglers. "Vera," he repeated. "The royal house of the ice worlds, the rulers who defied the syndicate. They were wiped out years ago." Sira nodded, tears glimmering on her cheeks. "Yes," she whispered. "My husband was slain, my children gone, my people scattered. The hunters you saw are syndicate hounds. Their task is simple. No Vera must remain. No spark of my family should live to rise again." Elias let out a slow breath, his fingers tightening on the pistol. He had expected she might be a thief or a fugitive. But royalty, the last ember of a fallen throne, that was something far more dangerous. "You should not be near me," Sira said suddenly, her voice breaking. "Anyone who stands with me will be hunted. Anyone who protects me will die. I bring only death and ruin. Yet you gave me warmth. Now you are tied to my curse. Elias looked at her, his eyes steady. I gave you a blanket because you were freezing, he said. I am not sorry for that, and I do not run from curses. Sira shook her head, her tears falling. You do not understand our vow, human. When you covered me, you became part of my bond. In my people's law, you are now my shelter. You cannot leave without breaking me. Elias sighed, a heavy sound in the empty bay. Then we stand together, he said simply. The widow stared at him, her lips trembling. Why? She whispered. Why would a man with nothing choose a burden that could kill him? Because a man is more than his credits, Elias answered, his voice firm. And because sometimes the galaxy forgets what it means to care. Maybe humans are foolish, but we do not abandon the cold. The words struck her like fire. She pressed a hand to her chest as if trying to hold in the emotion burning inside her. She had lost her family, her throne, her world. Yet here stood a human with empty hands and empty pockets, offering her more than kings had given. But danger was never far. The shadows of the docking bay shifted. Distant voices echoed. The hunters were still searching, their armor clicking against the steel floors, their scanners sweeping the station. Sira leaned closer to Elias, her voice trembling. If they find us, they will not only kill me, they will take you. They will break you until you beg to betray me, and even then, they will not spare you. Elias checked his pistol, the charge low, the barrel scarred. Let them try, he muttered. She touched his hand, her fingers cold but gentle. You do not know the price of this path, she whispered. If you stay with me, you will never know peace again. Elias looked at her, his jaw set. Peace is overrated, he said, but a purpose, a fight worth standing for, that is something I understand. For the first time, Sira smiled, a fragile thing, like ice breaking to reveal the river beneath. You are strange, human, she whispered, strange and reckless, but maybe that is why the stars fear your kind. Elias gave a small laugh. They don't fear us, he said. They just don't understand us. The moment was brief, but it was enough to plant a seed, a bond that grew not from law or vow, but from choice. Sira's secret was no longer just hers. It belonged to Elias now, and the hunters would soon learn that a single human with nothing to lose was far more dangerous than a king with an army. The docking bay lights flickered, shadows moved again, the hunters were close, and Elias knew their time was running short. He looked at Sira and said, If they want the last of the Vera, they will have to go through me first. And somewhere deep inside, he felt the truth. His journey was no longer about survival, it was about something greater. A secret widow, a broken throne, and a human heart that refused to let the cold win. The hunters did not rest, their boots shook the metal floors of the station. Their scanners pulsed through the air like heartbeats. Elias and Sira moved quickly through the abandoned docking bay, slipping into maintenance tunnels that smelled of rust and old oil. The cold wind from broken vents followed them. Elias kept his pistol ready, the charge almost empty, his body tired, but his mind sharp. Every corner could be a trap, every shadow could hide death. Sira walked behind him, clutching the blanket as if it was armor, her silver eyes glowing softly, her breathing unsteady. They will not stop, she whispered, her voice shaking. They are trained to hunt until nothing remains. They will follow us through every port, every ship, every star. Elias glanced back, his eyes steady. Then we keep moving, he said. Humans are good at running and better at surviving. They reached a service hatch that opened into the wider station corridors. The noise of the bazaar returned, voices, music, the clatter of machines. Elias pulled the hood of his coat higher, blending into the flow of bodies. Sira stayed close, her small frame almost hidden in the crowd, but the hunters were clever. They spread out like wolves, their helmets scanning heat signatures, their weapons hidden under cloaks. Whispers of alarm followed them. Aliens moved aside. No one dared interfere. No one dared protect the widow of Vera. Elias's stomach tightened. The crowd was thick, but not thick enough. We need a ship, he muttered, some way off this station before the net closes. Sira nodded weakly. There is one man, she said, a smuggler. He once served my house before it fell. His loyalty may be bought again if he still lives. They hurried toward the lower docks, a place of broken ships and broken laws, where smugglers drank and captains gambled away their last cargo. The air was heavy with smoke and the stench of fuel. Elias pushed through, eyes searching. A voice growled from the shadows. Sira of Vera, I thought you were dead. An old alien with metal arms stepped forward, his skin scarred, his eyes sharp. He looked at Elias with suspicion. And who is this human beside you? Sira bowed her head slightly. A man who gave me warmth, she said softly. A man who stands with me against the hunters." The smuggler laughed bitterly. "Then he is already doomed," he said. "But I owe your house one debt, and I always pay my debts." He pointed to a ship at the edge of the dock, a rusted freighter with patched wings and engines that rattled. "Take her. She will fly, though not far." Elias nodded. "Far is enough," he said. They moved quickly, boarding the freighter as the smuggler distracted the hunters with false leads. The engines roared to life, smoke filling the bay. The ship lifted slowly, creaking like an old beast, and then shot out into the blackness of space. For a moment, silence returned, stars stretched before them, endless and cold. Elias leaned back in the pilot's chair, sweat on his brow. "We made it," he muttered. But Sira shook her head, her silver eyes watching the void. "No," she whispered. "They will follow. They always follow." As if her words had called them, the radar blinked red, 3 hunter ships emerging from the dark, sleek and deadly, their engines burning like fire. They closed in fast, weapons armed. Elias cursed under his breath. "Of course they would," he muttered, his hands gripping the controls. "Hold on." The freighter shook violently as blasts of energy struck near its hull. Elias twisted the ship through asteroid fragments, weaving between spinning rocks. Sparks lit up the cockpit. Alarms screamed. Sira clung to the chair, her eyes wide with fear. "You cannot fight them," she cried. "This ship is too weak. We will be torn apart." Elias grinned, reckless fire burning in his eyes. "Humans don't fight fair," he said. He cut the power suddenly, the freighter drifting dark and silent. The hunters overshot for a moment, scanning for heat, confused by the sudden disappearance. Elias then reignited the engines, sending the ship spinning through a narrow cluster of asteroids. One hunter ship clipped a rock and exploded in fire. The others roared in fury, chasing harder. Sira stared at him in shock. "You risked death," she whispered. "You play with chance like it is nothing." Elias smirked. "Sometimes chance is all we have," he said, "and humans are good at making luck." The chase raged on, the hunters closing. Elias pulling tricks that no cautious pilot would dare, scraping past comets, diving through debris fields, each move reckless, each move keeping them alive one more second. Finally, he spotted a nebula ahead, a storm of glowing gas and lightning, dangerous, unpredictable. "That's our cover," Elias said, steering toward it. Sira gasped. "No ship survives inside," she warned, but Elias only smiled. "Then they won't expect us to try." The freighter plunged into the storm, light flashing, the ship shaking like it would tear apart. The hunters hesitated, unwilling to follow too deep. Elias pushed forward, his jaw tight, his heart steady. Inside the storm, silence returned, broken only by the hum of the engines. Elias looked at Sira, her face pale, her hands shaking. "We bought time," he said. "Not safety, but time." Sira's eyes softened. She touched his arm gently. "You risked everything for me again," she whispered. "Why do you keep doing this?" Elias looked out at the storm, the stars hidden, his voice calm but strong. "Because the galaxy is cold enough," he said. "Someone has to bring the warmth." The nebula storm slowly faded behind them. The freighter creaked and groaned, its engines coughing like an old beast. Elias sat in the pilot's chair, his hands steady on the controls, sweat running down his face. Beside him, Sira still clutched the blanket, her silver eyes watching him with quiet awe. For a brief moment, silence ruled. No hunters in sight, no blasts tearing through the hull, only the hum of failing engines and the endless black beyond. But Elias knew peace was fragile. Hunters never gave up, not when bloodlines were involved. His stomach growled again, loud and sharp, reminding him of the credit he had given away. He chuckled softly, shaking his head. "I should have bought food," he muttered. Sira tilted her head confused. "You regret the blanket?" she asked, her voice uncertain. Elias looked at her, his tired eyes soft. "No," he said firmly. "I regret nothing. But hunger makes a man think foolish thoughts." Her lips curved in a small smile, fragile but real. "Among my people, hunger is nothing compared to honor," she whispered. "You chose honor when you gave me warmth, but honor always carries a price." Elias leaned back in the chair, his pistol resting on his lap. "I know," he said, "but what kind of man sells his soul to fill his stomach?" Sira looked away, her silver tears shining. "Many would," she whispered. "I have seen friends sell family to survive. I have seen men betray kings for bread. Survival bends all vows." Elias shook his head slowly. "Maybe for others," he said, "but humans, we are strange. We fight even when we should fall. We hold on to something bigger than our bellies." Sira studied him, her voice soft but sharp. "Do you speak of pride or foolishness?" she asked. Elias smirked faintly. "Both," he said. "Pride keeps us standing. Foolishness keeps us trying when all logic says quit." Before she could answer, the radar Linked red again, 2 hunter ships reappeared on the edge of the storm, smaller now, cautious but still hunting. Elias cursed under his breath, his hands tightening on the controls. "They will not stop," Syrah whispered, fear trembling in her voice. "You could sell me, human. You could give them what they want. They would pay you more than you could dream. Food, wealth, safety, everything." Elias turned his head, his eyes cold but steady. "Do you think I would?" he asked. Her gaze fell, shame filling her. "I do not want to believe it," she whispered. "But I have seen many betray for less." Elias leaned closer, his voice low and sharp. "Listen to me. I will starve before I sell a soul. I will bleed before I trade your life for mine. That is the price of being human." Her eyes widened, glowing brighter. She pressed her hand against her chest, her voice breaking. "You speak as if your heart is made of fire," she whispered. "No wonder the galaxy fears your kind." Elias smiled faintly. "The galaxy doesn't fear us," he said. "It fears what we remind them of, that even in the coldest dark, there are still people who will choose others over themselves." The hunters drew closer, energy beams flashing past the freighter's hull. Sparks burst inside the cockpit. Alarm screamed. Elias gritted his teeth. The freighter shuddered, engines failing. "We cannot outrun them again," Syrah cried, panic in her voice. "The ship is dying." Elias stood, his eyes scanning the console, a plan forming in his reckless mind. "Then we fight," he said. Syrah stared at him, horror in her face. "Fight them," she whispered. "In this broken ship, with a pistol that barely fires." Elias grinned, a reckless fire in his eyes. "Humans fight with what they have, not with what they wish for," he said, "and sometimes that is enough." He rerouted the last of the freighter's power into the forward can. Nons, weak and unstable. The ship groaned like it was in pain. The hunters drew closer, their weapons glowing. Syrah reached for his arm, her fingers trembling. "If you fight, you may die," she whispered. "If you give me to them, you may live." Elias looked at her, his eyes fierce. "Living without honor isn't life," he said. "If I must die, then I die standing." The hunters closed in. The freighter shook. Elias fired the cannons. Weak blasts of light shot out. One hunter ship dodged, the other took a hit and spun out, sparks flying. Elias fired again, missing. The console erupted in smoke. The ship trembled violently. Alarms blared. Elias coughed through the smoke, laughing despite the chaos. "See," he said, "even broken ships have teeth." Syrah's eyes filled with tears, not of fear, but of something deeper, something warmer. "You risk everything for nothing," she whispered, "and yet you make me believe it is everything." The surviving hunter pulled back, circling cautiously, unwilling to risk the nebula again. Elias slumped into the chair, exhausted but alive. Syrah leaned closer, her voice soft. "You paid the price of humanity today," she whispered. "Not with credits, but with courage, with hunger, with blood." Elias closed his eyes, his lips curling into a faint smile. "It's a fair price," he muttered. And in the cold dark of space, with hunters still circling, the widow of Vera realized she was no longer simply a fugitive. She was bonded to something far stronger, the heart of a human who would never sell warmth for safety, never trade honor for survival. The freighter limped through space like a wounded animal, its engines weak, its hull scarred. Alarms whispered softly in the background. Elias sat in the pilot's chair, his body aching, his eyes heavy, but his spirit unbroken. Beside him, Syrah clutched the blanket tightly, her silver eyes glowing with worry and something deeper. For a time, they drifted in silence, but silence never lasts in the galaxy, the radar bee. Opid showing new signals, larger ships this time. Hunters reinforced by a command vessel. The Syndicate had sent more hounds. Elias cursed under his breath. "They brought the pack," he muttered, his jaw tight. Syrah's hands trembled. "We cannot face them," she whispered. "Not in this broken shell." Elias checked the star map, his eyes narrowing. Ahead lay a frozen planet, half ice, half storm, its surface buried in endless blizzards, its atmosphere sharp as knives. "There," he said, pointing. "We make for the surface. Maybe the storm hides us." Syrah gasped, fear flashing across her face. "That world kills without mercy," she whispered. "The cold there does not forgive. It devours flesh and bone." Elias gave a thin smile. "Cold or hunters, we pick our poison," he said, and pushed the failing engines toward the planet. The freighter shook violently as it entered the atmosphere. Ice storms slammed against the hull. Lightning flashed. The ship screamed like it would break apart. Elias gripped the controls, every muscle straining. Syrah cried out as the ship spun, metal tearing, sparks bursting, and then with a thunderous crash, they struck the frozen ground. Snow and ice exploded around them, the freighter half buried in the white wasteland, smoke rising from its shattered engines. Silence followed, broken only by the endless howl of the storm. Elias dragged himself out of the seat, coughing, blood at the corner of his mouth, his body shaking, but alive. He stumbled to Sira, who lay against the wall, her skin pale, her breath shallow. "You all right?" he asked, his voice rough. She nodded weakly, clutching the blanket closer. "Alive," she whispered. "But not for long, this cold. It eats me." Elias looked around. The wind howled. Snow cut across his face like blades. The cold pierced even his human bones, but Sira's alien body shook harder, fragile against the ice. Chito. He would not last without warmth. Without hesitation, Elias tore open an emergency locker, pulling out what little survival gear remained. A torn heat lamp, a cracked thermal shield, nothing strong enough, he cursed, his hands trembling. Sira's voice broke the storm. "Leave me," she whispered. "Save yourself. I cannot survive here, but you might." Elias knelt beside her, his eyes fierce. "No," he said. "I didn't spend my last credit to see you die in the cold. I won't let the ice take you." He pulled her close, wrapping the blanket around both of them, his body pressed against hers, his warmth bleeding into her freezing skin. She gasped softly, her silver eyes wide. "Why?" she whispered. "Why do you give so much?" Elias's breath was heavy, his voice a growl against the wind. "Because I promised myself I wouldn't let anyone freeze again," he said. "If the galaxy is ice, then humans will be fire." The storm raged outside, snow piling against the wreck, the temperature dropping. Elias's body shook, but he refused to let go. Sira felt his heart pounding, steady and fierce, a drum against the endless cold. Tears slipped from her glowing eyes. "You are burning yourself for me," she whispered. "Your fire will die." Elias smiled faintly, his lips blue. "Then let it die keeping you alive," he said. Suddenly the storm was split by new sounds. Engines, the hunters had tracked them. Their ships descended through the blizzard, lights cutting the snow, armored figures marching through the white, weapons glowing. Sira clutched Elias's arm, terror in her eyes. "They come," she whispered. "We cannot fight them here, not in this storm." Elias tightened his hold on her, his pistol weak, his body drained, but his spirit unbroken. "Then we fight with what we have," he said, his voice steady. The hunters approached, their red visors cutting through the snow. Their leader raised a blade, his voice loud over the sea. "Torm, give us the widow, human, and we may grant you a quick death." Elias stood slowly, his body a shadow in the storm, his arm around Sira, his pistol in his hand. "You want her," he said, his voice cold as the ice. "You'll have to walk through fire first." He fired, the storm exploding with light. The hunters returned fire, energy bolts tearing into the snow. The world became chaos, fire and ice clashing. Elias moving with reckless courage, shielding Sira with his body, his warmth keeping her alive. She felt it then, deep within, the power of her bloodline stirring, a fire not human, but alien, awakened by his sacrifice. Her eyes burned brighter, her hands glowing, and with a cry that shook the storm, she unleashed it. A wave of silver energy burst from her, the hunters thrown back, their armor cracking, the storm itself bending to her will, lightning answering her voice, snow turning to spears of ice that struck her enemies down. Elias stumbled, his eyes wide, watching the frail widow become a storm herself, power blazing around her. She turned to him, her tears glowing like stars. "You gave me your fire," she whispered. "Now I return it." Together they stood in the storm, fire and ice united, hunters falling around them, the syndicate's hounds broken by the bond of a starving human and a freezing widow. When the last hunter lay silent, the storm calmed, the world quiet again. Sira fell into Elias's arms, her power spent, her body weak. He held her close, his breath ragged, his warmth still protecting her. "You are safe now," he whispered, his voice fading but steady. "As long as I breathe, you are safe." The storm slowly faded, the blizzard grew quiet, the frozen planet lay still under the pale light of distant stars. The battlefield was covered in snow and broken armor. The hunters who had chased them across the stars now lay scattered, their fire silenced, their red eyes dim. Elias knelt in the snow, his body heavy, his breath shallow, blood marked his lips, his pistol broken in his hand, but his arms were wrapped tightly around Sarah, her body trembling, her silver eyes glowing faint but alive. She had unleashed her hidden power, but it had drained her strength. For a moment they sat in silence. The only sound was the wind whispering over the ice. Elias pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders, his own body shaking, his warmth still pressing against her cold frame. You should rest, he said softly, his voice rough. You used everything. Don't speak. But Sira shook her head weakly, her hand clutching his chest, feeling the beat of his heart. No, she whispered, her voice faint. I must speak. I must tell you what you have become. Elias frowned, confusion in his tired eyes. What I've become, he asked. She looked into his eyes, silver tears sliding down her cheeks. You are no longer only a drifter, no longer only a man with nothing. You are my bond, my warmth, my king of the ashes, she whispered. The hunters wanted to erase my bloodline, but they cannot, because you kept me alive, because you shared your fire. Now my line continues, not through power or throne, but through love. Elias shook his head, a faint smile on his lips. I am no king, he muttered. I'm just a fool who spent his last credit on a blanket. Sira's trembling hand touched his cheek, her eyes glowing brighter. And that foolish act has saved a queen. That foolish act has defied the syndicate. That foolish act has given me back hope, she said, her voice breaking. Do you not? See, Elias, your small kindness is greater than crowns. Elias closed his eyes for a moment, letting her words sink into the storm's quiet, his heart heavy but warm. If that is true, he said softly, then maybe foolishness is worth more than wisdom. Sira smiled faintly, leaning against him. Yes, she whispered. Foolishness that burns like fire. Foolishness that refuses to let the cold win. That is the heart of humanity. The storm passed, and the stars shone brighter, but danger was not gone. The syndicate would send more. The hunters were many. Their war never ended. Elias knew this peace was fragile, but in that moment he also knew something stronger than fear. He looked down at Sira, her head resting against his chest, her breath steady again. You said your vow bound you to me, he whispered. But maybe it is me who is bound to you now. Her lips curved in a soft smile. Then we are bound together, she said gently. Not by law, not by blood, but by choice, by warmth. Elias pulled her closer, his voice firm despite his weakness. Then let the galaxy come. Let the syndicate send all their hunters. I will stand, I will fight, as long as you are beside me. Her silver tears fell again, but this time they were not from pain. They glowed with hope. You speak like a man who carries stars in his chest, she whispered. No wonder the universe cannot understand humans. You give when you have nothing. You fight when you should fall. You love when it costs you everything. Elias laughed softly, his breath turning to mist in the frozen air. Maybe that is our curse, he said, or maybe it is our gift. She reached up and kissed his forehead gently, her lips cold but filled with warmth. Then it is a gift I will carry forever, she whispered. You gave me a blanket when I had nothing. Now I give you my life, my love, my bed, my fire. The storm settled into silence, and the wreck of the freighter became their shelter. Elias held her close, his eyes closing, exhaustion finally taking him, but his heart steady, his body wrapped around hers, keeping her alive, keeping her warm. In the days that followed, they built a small refuge among the wreck. The storm still raged outside, but inside, they created a fire, small and fragile, yet strong enough to keep them alive. Elias hunted with what little tools he could salvage. Sira used her fading powers to shield them from the worst of the blizzards. Together they endured. Each night she lay beside him, the blanket around them, her head resting on his chest, listening to his heart. This sound, she whispered, this fire, it is the only crown I need. And Elias would smile faintly, tired but content. Then let it be yours, he said. The syndicate never stopped searching. Whispers carried through the stars of a human who defied hunters, of a widow who rose from the ashes of her bloodline. Together they became a story, a legend told in markets and taverns. Some laughed, some feared, but all listened. And though Elias never sought glory, and Sira never sought a throne, their bond became stronger than both. It was not built on power or wealth, but on one simple truth. Sometimes the smallest act of kindness changes the fate of worlds. On that frozen planet, fire and ice slept side by side, a human drifter who once had nothing, and an alien widow who once had lost everything, now bound together in warmth beyond credits.